Thank you, Janet, and thank you, members of the National Coal Council. It's a privilege to be here. Let me say, if there are any difficult questions at the end or comments or criticisms, you will be assigned drafting responsibilities for the next report. So just keep that in mind. So I have the privilege of being here from beautiful downtown Laramie, Wyoming, with a population of 35,000 people, and that's when the school is in session. But I'm here to talk about very early stage initiative by the school in which I sit, the School of Energy Resources, and what we're calling the Carbon Engineering Initiative, or sometimes we will refer to it as the coal refinery. And before I begin, I want to make clear that I'm giving remarks on behalf of several individuals, all of whom have played a role in the production of these slides. It's another reason to withhold any difficult questions, if you will. First of all, my boss, Mark Northam, who's the director of the School of Energy Resources, Richard Horner, who's the deputy director of emerging projects and technology within the School of Energy Resources, and finally Carl Bauer, who many of you know, he was my predecessor in the role as the director of the Carbon Management Institute at the University of Wyoming, and he's now serving as a consultant here. I'd like to shout out to some of our colleagues from the University of Wyoming here, Dr. Fan, a privilege to see you as well. He's doing enough to keep coal going in Wyoming than anybody else I know. So a brief outline. I'm going to give one perspective on where coal is in Wyoming from the 10,000 foot level. And I'm not here speaking on behalf of the university. I'm not here speaking on behalf of the state of Wyoming. So some of these are personal perspectives. I'm going to talk about some of the emerging new market opportunities for coal, and then I'll talk a little bit about the specifics of this carbon engineering initiative we have going on in Laramie. So this is one view from Wyoming, and like with any talk, I'm going to begin with some caveats. Although I am speaking about new markets for coal, nothing I have to say should be interpreted as anybody in the University of Wyoming thinks that the BTU markets for coal will not continue to be bright. So I'm not talking about replacing coal volumes in BTU markets. We envision those markets continuing. We are talking about expanding the suites of potential products that can be produced from coal. I just wanted to make that clear. In the near term, there are organizations such as the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority that are doing yeoman's work on trying to increase coal export markets. Certainly there are challenges to that. Wyoming is a state that is dependent upon its neighbors. It is certainly in terms of getting coal out of the state, but there is a big push in terms of coal exports, and that effort is going on. It's led by many individuals in the state, most notably the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority. That's really an immediate imperative we would see. In the medium term, probably over the next 10 years, like everyone else in this room, we are big fans of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Indeed, for reasons that are complicated to explain, I've largely built my career upon what you do when you stick CO2 into the ground, whether it's a saline reservoir or whether you're using it for enhanced oil recovery. I am all in on that. We've got our chips across the table on that. I think sometimes there's an awful lot expected of that technology sooner rather than later, and I think those expectations are sometimes commercially unreasonable and unfair. I'm actually heartened by the progress that's been made in CCUS over the recent years, and we can really see those opportunities expanding. Indeed, the group I run at the University of Wyoming, the Carbon Management Institute, is largely a team of geologists that are looking at the subsurface aspects. So we've got geophysicists, geologists, petrologists, you name it, who provide one-stop shopping in terms of applied research on what happens when you put CO2 into the subsurface. Also, Wyoming, just to put in a little plug, we have one of the best, I would say, characterized deep saline reservoirs in the United States. That's the Rock Springs Uplift in southwestern Wyoming, which sits just a mile away from the largest CO2 source in the Rocky Mountains. That's Pacific Corp's Jim Bridger Power Plant. This site's also about a mile or two away from existing CO2 pipeline infrastructure. And when you're sitting in Wyoming, these carbon management policy imperatives are not hypothetical. They are very, very real. So, for example, Wyoming is wheeling some portion of its electricity into California. Oil that is produced in Wyoming is exported into markets like California. So we wake up every day and we see the California low carbon fuel standard. We see all those West Coast mandates that are impacting today the markets for our products today. So we feel a real imperative for answering these issues about what we need to do with the carbon dioxide. And let me also say a big plug here to the Wyoming legislature that has been nothing but wholehearted in its financial and policy support to the carbon management work that the University of Wyoming is doing. More long-term, and what I'm going to talk about now is, again, as an additional market for coal. We are not talking about how are we going to replace potential lost CO2 coal volumes in BTU markets. We are looking about what else can you do with coal. And here I'm going to use the term carbon engineering or the coal refinery concept, and that's what we're going to talk about during the rest of my slide. Now, as John, I think the prior speaker noted, what I have to say today, and this will disappoint you, I'm sure, is largely nothing new. These concepts are not new. So this is a slide from the U.S. Geologic Survey. I think it was published in 1955, I want to say. Don't quote me on that year, but it's about that vintage. And I consider this to be the tree of life, or you can call it the tree of coal. But these are all, it's impossible to read on this slide, I apologize for that, but every one of those green leaves is a specific product that at one time was or could be made from coal in the United States. So nothing here at some level is new. I will proudly say we are reinventing the wheel. We are standing on literally more than a century worth of work that has been done. And Janet, I must say, all credit to you and the National Coal Council, I pulled out my list of reports going back to June 1986, and it looks like the first report this esteemed body published in June 1986 was entitled Coal Conversion, which was 30 years ago, almost to the date. So I promise, if I'm still alive, I promise to come back in 30 more years, in 2046, to give you an update on our progress. But again, I want to emphasize this. This is reassuring. We're not talking about trying to build a rocket. We're not talking about trying to build a time machine. A lot of this is dusting off old technology, updating it, putting it in a commercial context, and advancing it. And that's not to say R&D isn't needed, but I'll focus on that. So again, just sort of emphasizing the point that this technology is not new. The first oil refining process was invented to upgrade coal more than 150 years ago. And that was before oil was discovered in Pennsylvania. So it's hard to get your mind around this, but effectively the first, what we would call today as a refinery, the first refineries in the United States were fed by coal. They were not fed by oil. So we're going back to the Civil War, we're updating the science and technology, and we're bringing it forward. At least that's the plan. So we are looking at new markets for coal. We are focused on markets other than BTU. And again, that is not to say we are not abandoning the research on how to improve the thermal efficiency of coal plants. Again, we're doing a huge amount of work on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Dr. Fan, who I previously noted here, is doing a significant amount of cutting-edge work on coal gasification. We are all over research on the BTU value of coal like a cheap suit. We're talking about here looking at broader markets, and we're focused on high-value products, again, which we're referring to having a non-BTU value. So we sort of look at, so our initial stake on this is that what are the commercial opportunities? And here, quite frankly, as an academic institution, we may be somewhat unique in our approach, and maybe there's something in the water or soils of Wyoming, But when you're in Wyoming, you get up every day and you have a market-based approach. And the School of Energy Resources has a market-based approach. So while we gladly support any kind of academic research, all research is good. I truly believe that. But at the end of the day, when you're working for a land-grant university, you're consuming precious public dollars. We want to get up every morning and say, we perceive a likely return on those public dollars. And we certainly feel that deep in our soul at the School of Energy Resources. So we've sort of taken a look at the markets for non-BTU products from coal. Of course, we all know the coal to chemical story of China, Germany, and India, but we also share, as John said, I thought we provide a pretty decent team here. We're sort of saying very, very similar aspects here. We sort of looked at where the markets for carbon-based materials are coming. We do see, for example, in the automobile industry, pressure for lighter weight materials. We certainly see that in the airline industry. So that might drive you to carbon fibers. So we don't understand why there cannot be a carbon fiber industry in the state of Wyoming whose feedstock is Powder River Basin coal. And we will, not only will we be exporting electrons to the West Coast, but we will be manufacturing in the state of Wyoming carbon fiber aircraft wings that Boeing will use in their manufacturing facilities. That is certainly our vision. That is certainly the vision of the School of Energy Resources. And these other attributes, superior functional performance that you get from carbon-based materials, and on and on and on. So before we began this carbon refinery initiative or coal refinery initiative, we sat down and said, what were the attributes that this program or this facility had to have? And here they were. First of all, we had to maximize the yield of carbon-based intermediates and finished products, number one. Number two, the slate of products produced had to be greater than the BTU value of coal, just selling coal into the power markets. We would only include non-coal feeds to the extent necessary to support the operations. So this facility, if it is designed, or facilities, if it is designed and constructed, will be built to maximize the production of coal, the usage of coal. This is a coal-focused initiative. We are going to look at deliberate hydrogen recovery and reuse from coal. We're going to look at the extraction and complete process use of water extracted from coal, zero or minimal CO2 emissions, optimal energy consumption, and zero effluent discharge. So we are designing this to be as clean as possible, reusing water, no CO2 emissions, no carbon footprint, just turning coal into high-value, non-BTU products as the market demands. So what are some of these products? Here, we all think today of an oil refinery, right? Actually, the word refinery, you think of an oil refinery, right? You're putting crude in the front end, and you're producing a slate of products out of the back end. What the Carbon Engineering Initiative purports to do, if we are successful, is to build a coal refinery where you're putting coal in the front end, and you're producing a potential slate of additional products, many of which are outlined here. You'll see there are similarities between an oil refinery and a coal refinery in that they are each capable of producing a common suite of products. There are some products you can get from oil that you cannot get from coal, but there certainly are additional products you can get from coal that you can't get from oil. And again, there is nothing here that is new. This is literally kind of post-Civil War era technology that just needs to be dusted off, updated, and brought into the current policy environment of environmental controls. So we see this, potential site, and these facilities and the technologies that we're evaluating will be fine-tuned to maximize the use of Powder River Basin coal, because Powder River Basin coal does have some unique characteristics. Again, we're a state institution. We are focused on Wyoming-based coals, but we're looking at where this facility might be. You might site this kind of facility or program at the mine mouth, or you might actually, site it at one of Wyoming's power plants to making use of some of the synergies that many of the other prior speakers have already mentioned. But before I close here, I do want to emphasize there is, let's say this program is successful and one or more of these facilities is built, it will never supplant the volumes of coal that are currently used in power markets. So here this slide just goes through the various energy content of various amounts of coal. At the end of the day, the punchline is the last bullet, that if you had one of these facilities, sized at 100,000 barrels per day of production, it will still only be using about 4% of Wyoming coal production. So this is another reason why we see this as additive to current thermal markets for coal. We don't ever view this as replacing the inevitable and continuing power markets for coal. So where are we now? And I'm almost done here, and Jan, I think I will keep us here on time. Again, our program's aspirational outcome is, as stated here, to develop a sustainable stream of valuable carbon-based products, leveraging Wyoming's competitive coal advantages of coal. We're in the midst of a 2-year plan. What we have in progress, we're doing a determination of the state of possible products that might be manufactured from PRB. We are looking at the economics of a coal refinery. We actually have a rudimentary design of that facility done, and we're trying to better understand carbon product markets that would be tied to coal conversion technologies. What we will be doing in the coming year is we will be establishing a techno-economic viability assessment of the coal refinery. We are starting now research on the decomposition products of Wyoming PRB coal. And again, this process is premised on low temperature thermal composition of coal. We're keeping it below combustion temperatures. And again, we're trying to dust off coal chemistry from 100 years ago and say, if you take coal up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, what comes off? If you take it at 400, what comes off? And on and on and on. And what can you do with the residue that is left? We are going to be scoping the coal conversion and carbon materials from research projects and identifying other research initiatives. And then we'll be developing a business case that we hope will help attract additional outside investment. And I will say that this initiative does have the support of the Wyoming legislature, which again has kindly provided some seed funding that is carrying us through in the initial years of this project. So that concludes my remarks. And again, Janet, I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank the members of the National Coal Council for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.